Thank you, Lucia. So what we're going to do today here is really embrace the joy of spreadsheets, of Microsoft Excel, and of numbers. After I put together this presentation, I said to my husband, there's no pictures in it. And he said, boring. But it really is about business analysis, which really mostly gets down to numbers and not pictures. So in particular, what we are going to do here today is talk about financial goal setting, finding profit centers and cost sinks within your business, and then look at a common cost sink in a close-up way, and that's going to be labor management and labor productivity. And then we're going to talk about an annual review of those things. That's really important too. I'd like to know a little bit more about the folks that are in the audience. Could you please raise your hand if you are currently operating a farm business? Okay. John, why didn't you raise your hand? Yeah, there you go. Could you raise your hand? And this next question, it doesn't matter if you're doing it now or it's what you're looking to do. If you're looking to work in or have a business in livestock, could you raise your hand? Okay. Vegetables? Grains? Floriculture? Okay. All right. And nursery? All right. Okay, great. Just kind of reading the room a little bit. So I do want to give some background to myself and my business. I don't have too many qualifications for standing up here right now, other than I think doing a good job on my own farm and within my own business, and being pretty rigorous about continuously reviewing and seeking out continuing education. In particular, some of the things that have been most edifying for me have been participating in peer review networks for farm business metrics. So that's been really, really huge, both when independently organized with some farmers in New Jersey, and then also PASA got a pretty decent grant program worked out to do financial benchmarking within farmer peer groups. So where farmers just compared their numbers with each other and were able to really start looking at what things were efficient about which types of businesses and what was making people make enough money to keep on making a go at this. So Chickadee Creek Farm is on leased land. I don't own land, but I own the business and all of the means of the business. When I started in 2010, you can sort of see where we started. I had an 1.5 acres in production. In terms of how many hours were worked on the farm that year, it's 1.5 full-time equivalents. That might not be a term that people are super familiar with, but that's what one full-time person would be doing if they were working that job all year round, not just seasonally. There was one crew member. We went to 2 farmers markets and had 10 CSA members. The sales season was just 26 weeks. Had very little protected cover space, so high tunnel space. And at that point, my goal was within 3 years to be netting, like take-home pay, $50,000 annually. So now, 2022, so last year's metrics. 16.5 acres in protection, about 8.5 full-time equivalents for crew, and that's within 10 people on the crew, which includes me. We go to 6 farmers markets a week, and we have 900 CSA members. We pretty much sell all year. We take a break for a couple weekends a year. We have about 1 acre in high tunnel space, and the profit goal is now more realistic at $90,000 annually. And I want to talk a little bit about that profit goal, because I think that before starting farming and in my first couple years, if I had gone to a presentation where somebody said the profit goal was $90,000 annually, I would have said, get the fuck out of here. Like, that's not possible. All right, so when you're making a profit goal, it's pretty important to be like a big old grown-up adult about it. So the first thing you got to start with is your personal financial health. So not even the business side yet. Like, if you're going to be running a business, you have to make sure that you're figuring out how to pay enough to keep on doing this sustainably, which means you don't quit and burn out. So Everybody needs to be making an annual personal budget. If you aren't using some kind of like nerd wallet thing to do this already, their Google Drive has a template that you can easily fill out to just be filling out what your actual costs of living are per year. We encourage our crew to do this on our farm. So we, every couple years, do an in-service personal financial health for our employees so that people are keeping on top of this stuff. And from this, you also need to work into your budget for your net profit goals, contributions to your retirement savings, because we're not working for the government. We're not working for like the school system. Like we need to be figuring this out on our own as business owners, as farmers. And I do recommend you check out the Social Security Administration.gov calculator for that to help you figure out how much you need to save for retirement. Savings can also include things like 529s for your kids, so college savings accounts, and a 3 to 12 month emergency fund. So this is just stuff we don't talk about a whole ton in farming that we need to be saving for all this stuff. Like absolutely hands down, have to be doing it. It's just as important as the capital investment in your business. And if you don't do it when if you're under 30, raise your hand. Do it now! So compounding interest will save you if you are investing early in this stuff. I made the mistake of investing heavily in my business early on instead of in retirement accounts, and you have to save so much more money then if you do it that way. So please do, like, look up this stuff now and budget for it right now. Right now. All right, so personal financial health, and then there's also your business goals. And that's got to be part of your business expense budget too, not just your net profit, but your sales budget for your business every year. A lot of businesses see a 10% capital reinvestment as being pretty healthy per year. So of your sales that come in, think of 10% of that going back into business reinvestment. You are going to have other business goals as well. So we talked a little bit about the savings for the farm owner, but what about everybody who works at the farm and their wages and your goals for their livelihoods, upping their wages, making sure that they also have retirement benefits. So those are the other business goals to be thinking about when we're thinking about these net profit goals. But for a lot of farms, what the take-home pay for the farmer is going to be is the net profit. I just don't want to ignore speaking at all about those goals for the people who work for the farm and how that has to be taken care of too before the net profit for the farmer also gets taken care of. So what we're going to look at next is kind of an adult family budget of that net profit goal. This is roughly based on my own life, probably, obvious. And again, some of these savings would be less if it was done earlier. So I'm almost 40, and if I had been putting like a little bit away for the retirement stuff early on, that's the IRA part, it wouldn't have had to have been so much. But this is worth going through right now. So there's this savings in those first 3 rows, and then there's just cost of expenses. So property taxes, kids at school, diapers, like that's the one-person share of cost of expenses for one household, a frugal 4-person family. But then the huge number here is that land mortgage. So that's what it will cost. And again, I'm not in a purchase agreement yet with my farm, but that's what it costs per year to pay the mortgage for the farm. And that is why for Chickadee Creek Farm, the net profit goal has to be high. Like we have to aim high, or else the whole business is somewhat unstable. There's other ways that you, in your businesses, might have a different way of looking at this. If you have a really stable long-term lease, like 30-year lease, then you don't need to be working in a mortgage cost. And if ownership of land is not something that is part of your goal, then you obviously don't need to make a budget that has that extra $55,000 a year in it. But you do need to at least look at your own goals and figure out that number, and then add it all up at the end. Figure out what you really have to be netting. how do we get to the net goal? Hi, Eric. It's maybe worth just reviewing what net profit is. So your net profit is all the money that's left over after you've paid everything off in a year. So you've got your sales, everything that you sold. Sometimes it's called your gross sales. And then you have your expenses. And your sales minus your expenses is your net profit. So that's the take-home pay. On some farms, the head farmer might be on payroll as well. So that's also just something to think about in that, like what the actual number has to be. If you're on payroll, on my farm I'm on payroll, it means that I can count my payroll take home as part of the net that I need to get to be able to pay for the farm mortgage too. So in this middle one, the sales are huge. They're great. They're awesome. That means that the net also has the potential to look awesome, especially if that expense is really shrunk down. But then on the bottom one, the net's all puny and tiny and sclerotic, and it's because our expenses were big and our sales were small. So at its most basic level, the way to take that net profit and make it big is to maximize your sales, minimize your expenses. So pretty simple so far. And the way that you can start doing it is by finding your profit centers and your cost sinks. This is going to be fairly vegetable focused for a couple minutes, but the principles of this apply to any type of business. This is the place to get started. I did not write this book. A man named Richard Wisswall wrote this book, The Organic Farmer's Business Handbook. He wrote it in 2009, and I started my business in 2010. Somebody handed it to me early that year, and I opened it and thought, oh, no, this is too much stuff. This is just really overwhelming. Because the premise of this book is to go through every single facet of your entire farm and figure out what the overhead for every little thing costs, and then which portions of the overhead every separate enterprise might take on. It's really spreadsheet intensive, probably takes a good week so like 40 hours to be filling out this data. So for example, if your farm had both a sod farm and a malting house, both of those operations are paying part of the mortgage, are paying some of the insurance, are paying some of the cost of roadway repair for the driveway that goes into the farm, all of which are costs that have to be absorbed by something on the farm. They're all overhead. All of those costs have to be apportioned somewhere within the business. On our farm, we grow 50 different types of vegetables. So all of those types of vegetables have to assume part of our workers' comp insurance. And every foot of bed space has to assume some part of workers' comp insurance. And our high tunnels have to assume more of it because they take more labor time. So every single industry or every single enterprise will have some share of its costs. And we're going to look at one of the scary spreadsheets now. So what I'm specifically saying is everybody should go through this. This book, this is one of Wisswall's books. This book comes with a CD with these spreadsheets pre-filled with their numbers and instructs you how to go through and find all of this stuff for your own business. The different worksheets in this will help you find your overhead per bed. So overhead per planting area, basically. It will help you find the cost of making a finished flat of seedlings. The cost of your equipment use. So for example, we have a number of different tractors on our farm, some of which are from the 60s and some of which are as new as 2017. And you would think that the ones from the 60s would cost less to use, but it's not true when we go through and actually work out the numbers in these spreadsheets, because we use the ones from 2017 so much more that the per hour charge for their use is actually much less than the ones from the 1960s. And the per hour enjoyment of the use of the ones from 2017 is much higher than the one from the 1960s as well. So running those numbers in this excruciating fashion really does bring to light where your costs are. It's not just as simple as that tractor costs $6,000, this tractor costs $32,000. It's really like, what is the effective use to make something else out of it? Other things that these spreadsheets really nail into are sales outlets. And this is a pretty big one. So you can sell your stuff straight to an end user, the person at the farmer's market, the CSA customer. You could choose to deliver it or not deliver it to them. You could choose to sell your goods through a natural food store or grocery store. You could choose to sell them to a distributor who will come by your farm and pick it up. Each of those different ways of selling has costs and benefits. And these spreadsheets will let you fill out line item by line item the costs for those different ways of doing it. So it's really a practice in discipline more than anything, and using a pre-existing template to lead you through actually looking through and thinking through all the different costs that there are in your sales outlets, in your farmer's market. The farmer's market one is wild, so I think I have that one up here. We know that before we even make a dime at a farmer's market, we already lost $300 at a farmer's market. That is just from having the trucks to go there, having the materials go there, having the labor staffed for that day, and it does not include the cost that we put in towards the product that we're bringing. Those products have their own cost to produce them. So when we just imagine going to the farmer's market, we are $300 in the hole already. We also realized that if we are on our farm, if we're not at least making about $1,800 per farmer's market, we should not be there. So at each one individual farmer's market. So we mostly sell through farmer's market. I'm not trashing farmer's markets, but the bar for us having it make sense to be there is an $1,800 per market bar. And through time, having that clarity of that number, the number has changed with time too. You have to update the spreadsheets once in a while. Having that clarity for that number has really empowered us to walk away from sales situations that aren't working. Like knowing what the number has to be pushes us towards only putting time into things that actually make sense for our business and will allow us ultimately to pay the people who work for us well, which is one of our big business goals. So there's one more painful spreadsheet to look at. We talked about having to go through and really nail down your costs, like really, really figure out what your overhead is, transplant production, costs of marketing, but then you're really also going to want to know how much money you could possibly make on an individual crop. This could be done for every single product that you grow or enterprise that you have, or type of flower in your cut flower field, or plants in your nursery. It could be done for every type of cut of chicken that you're going to be producing. But it is a cradle to grave analysis of all the different steps in producing that one product. The way that these are set up in the Wiswall book, and you can alter this for whatever your product is, but it's nice to have something to start with, are that you're looking at both the labor cost, the machinery cost, and the materials cost that are involved in each step of the process. This particular sheet is using Richard Wiswall's template, but it's using one of the crops on our farm as an example. This crop is winter head lettuce production. It is updated for the current year, so we first did one of these, I think about 5 years ago, to check which crops to grow in tunnels. And the yellow column is all labor costs. That really had to be updated recently because our average labor cost is $18 an hour now. The machinery cost, which actually didn't change that much, and then the product costs, which did edge up a little bit this past year. So every single step is thought through. In this case, the unit of measurement is 200-foot long beds of head lettuce. I don't think I have a pointer here, so Oh, it looks like it should. Not going to mess with it. But our high tunnels, the beds are about 4 feet wide on the top, and they're 200 foot long. I mean, I guess we get about 190 feet of usable bed space there. And the labor cost is really the biggest part of our pre-harvest subtotal. So everything from producing the seedlings in the greenhouse, preparing the beds, applying compost, using row cover on and off, which is a big thing in the winter, any supplies used for irrigation, the time used for the irrigation. We use a little bit of compost and a little bit of soybean meal for fertility. So all of the labor before we come into any harvesting comes to $285. Machinery cost is only about $10.50 for the 2 beds, and product costs $158, coming into a pre-harvest cost of $554. So that's just for the action of that crop. Next, we have to get into the overhead. So I talked about calculating all of that overhead. So what is winter head lettuce's share of our workers' comp insurance? And what is the winter head lettuce's share of our electric costs? For most, the choice that we make on our farm when we look at these budgets is that we're going to spread that mostly just across the area of the farm. So we take our whole overhead, we divide it by our acreage, most of the acreage gets the same cost. The high tunnelers are a little different though, because they had this big expensive $12,000 to $16,000 building that had to be built over top of them, so they have to pay for that. So the high tunnel overhead gets pretty intense. I think I have to go to the next slide for it. Yeah, so our overhead just for those 2 beds is $1,800 a year. So the overhead for out in the field beds isn't nearly that high. It's only about $200. So the high tunnels are definitely having to pay a lot more for overhead costs. It makes sense, right? There's all that steel involved. That is one of the middle yellow arrow there. The upper yellow arrow is talking about our total costs involved. So we got to that $450 level just before having the crop grow to maturity before harvest. Then all of the harvest activities also had to be brought into account. So cutting the lettuce, putting it in the truck, driving it down to the wash pack station, washing it, packing it into the crates. That had to be accounted for somewhere. And the good news is, once you have run those numbers for one crop, they're going to be about the same for all of them. So you don't have to keep on doing a lot of this math for every single crop on your farm. Once you do one of these spreadsheets, you're mostly going to be able to apply this stuff to all the other ones, and not too many things will change. So it's not like going to the dentist every single time you run one of these. Our total crop cost plus overhead for 2 beds of lettuce then comes to $2,550, which if you were standing in the high tunnel, you wouldn't intuitively know this. And that's the thing about running the numbers on your business. Humans don't have good heads for just memorizing this stuff and knowing it intuitively by looking at it. That's why you really do have to pull out your spreadsheets and dust off the keypads and just start putting the numbers in. The good news is that we make plenty of money anyway off of the head lettuce. So we get 1,900 heads off of those 2 beds. In the winter, we're charging $375 for them. So the total sales number is $7,125 with a profit of $4,575.84. Pretty precise. I'm sure it's not actually that in reality, but it's going to be pretty close to that. Who thinks this is excruciating to have to go through all of that? It is. I'm excited about it, and I still think it's excruciating. It's like the antsiest week of my life to put that stuff together. But the cool thing is, it's just 1 week. It's just 1 week of your life, and then you know what the hell you're talking about with your own costs and your own business. So it's pretty stinking important to figure it out. Why would you do this? So why would you do this for all the different crops that you grow? Don't do it for all the different crops you grow. Do it for the ones that you're worried about, the ones where you've got like that inkling that one might not be worth it. So we have weeded out whole things from our farm using this process. Goodbye, cauliflower, you suck. See you later, Brussels sprouts, you're not for us. Broccoli, I love you, but we're not good at you. So there's whole crops that we figured out we were making a shitty profit turnover on, and we shouldn't have been wasting our time on it. And really there's that opportunity cost. If you're spending all that time and labor on those crops instead of focusing on something you're actually good at, then you're undervaluing your time and you're undervaluing your people. So that's probably different depending on the marketplace you're on. At a farmer's market, we can set our costs or start our prices, and they're going to be naturally informed by what other vendors there are setting their prices at. So we'll just find there's not a tolerance to go above something. So with broccoli, we're like, well, we need to charge this much for broccoli. Like we need to charge this much for broccoli. People stopped buying as much broccoli from us because they don't want it at that cost. So we're like, okay, this is a mutual breakup then. Yeah.
So my follow-up is like when you knew that your price needed to move up,
Yeah.
then like how much over your cost of production were you estimating like to test
Yeah.
the market?
Yeah. So here on this spreadsheet, and I don't have like all of our other ones here. On this spreadsheet, we don't have the per acre shown, but on a lot of these spreadsheets, we have a per acre net profit. So we would be aiming at something like at least 15,000 for like a net for keeping something. Because some years are gonna go worse than that. Like there's just gonna be weather stuff where we're not gonna be able to hit that every year. So we at least need our average to be up there. So that's like the net profit number has to be pretty nice. Yeah. Yeah, there is some number in here, 5% estimate to lose 5% to tragedy. Yeah, and you can change that based off your own tragic circumstances. Yeah. So the easy thing is to change your prices and just bump your prices up, but there's going to be marketplace restraints on that. And then the other thing about this is you can very easily alter these spreadsheets based off of what your ending price is for your marketing outlet. So if you're doing it by the case wholesale, then those are the prices you plug in there. And you might be saving some marketing costs in that too. So, this is taking into account our farmers market expense, and the winter head lettuces is like, it's assigned value of the farmers market expense. But if it was a distributor coming to pick it up, then our marketing costs would be a lot less. It's just so would our price per, our like sales per. James?
So looking at this example of winter lettuce, you're like at around a 66% gross margin, which is really healthy. Is that reflected in a lot of the other crops you have, or is this better?
This is better. So like our high tunnel crops are like really good. Yeah, we like them.
What would you say about blended gross margin you want to get to, looking at an income statement to get to your 15% net?
Say that a little louder.
So what kind of blended gross margin across all the sales channels, right?
Yeah.
Where do you need your cost of goods sold to be to reach around the 15% net, which is where you're at?
So I guess that's not exactly the way that I look at it. I look at trying to reach my $90,000 a year.
Right.
In whichever blend of what customers will buy at like the highest possible returns. So, and that's part of why we grow 50 different things instead of 10. I think it would be a pretty nice life to only grow 10 things. That sounds pretty sweet. So I just pick off like my 10 highest and go with that. That'd be great. But with our current marketplace desires for those things, we wouldn't be able to sell enough for me to hit my 90. So then we add in, things 20 through 30, which are not as great. And we know that they don't produce as well for us, so we don't waste much time on them. And we have very little patience with their sass. And that's another thing about this, is if you learn some crops aren't really that profitable, don't have patience with their SAS. If they're not performing well, you don't go through heroics to make sure they're doing well at any given time. You let them die. Carrots, we do really well with carrots actually, but if there's a really healthy flush of weeds coming up on a bed of carrots, I kill it. I rototill it. We don't even try. We walk on because that carrot field has gone into a bad zone down here and it must leave. So this does help you become pretty brutal with your crop mix, and it can help you become pretty brutal with your marketing outlets too. And that's the whole point, is brutality. This is a break. There was a lot of spreadsheets that we were just looking at. Now you can look at a triumphant toddler with a pepper for a second. Take a break from it. Shake your shoulders out a little bit from all of those spreadsheets. Thank you. All right, so cost sinks. We were just looking at how to find which things are making a decent amount of net profit. Now, which things are costing us a ton of money? Because that's the other part of that. That's the other part of the whole equation. Like, where are we spending this money anyway? So what is the best way to find them? You can either be totaling it all up at the end of the year. So if you are not keeping track of everything you spend on your business, you are mad. You have to be keeping track of everything in some way. QuickBooks is a really easy way to do it. I was super resistant to paying QuickBooks' recurring fees, so I used Excel spreadsheets for a really long time, like until last year. So Excel is totally fine, but you have to be able to keep track of everything. And then you can total them up by category and see what you're spending on. So what's your labor, what's your seeds? But benchmark ratios are even cooler, and I'm really excited to talk to you about them. So benchmark ratio allows you to look at your business in a year-to-year way in a much more reflective state. So if you were just totaling up your categories, then it's not going to really show you differences in the growth of your business or the shrinkage of your business. And for a long time, our business was consistently growing every year. So in 2010, if our labor costs were $15,000, and then in 2022, our labor costs were $350,000, 2022 looks like we overspent on labor compared to 2010, but you have to take into account the sales that labor generated. So a benchmark ratio is looking at your sales in relation to that cost category. For example, if we were looking at the labor benchmark, a farm with $100,000 of sales and $45,000 in labor would have a 45% benchmark ratio. So, I said the numbers a little wrong. Sorry, $46,000, 46%. So it's your costs as they relate to your sales. So your cost category as it relates to sales. And this can help you figure out what's happening with your business trends better than just summing it up and looking at it year to year. If people have really stable businesses, if like your sales are pretty much the same every year, then this might not be as useful to you. I'm gonna just move forward to the next slide and then we'll see if there's still a question. So this is an example of my farm's benchmark ratios from the past 4 years. So this is a way for me to share our numbers without really sharing our numbers. Fancy. So it is our expenses per category divided into our sales for that year. And we can look at this and learn lessons about where our business spends most of its money, where we see things changing from year to year, and really focus in on where we spend most of our money and dialing in on making sure that is money well spent. It's not a crime to spend money, but we want to be doing it wisely. So a couple of the things that are notable in this, other than just do this for yourself, you probably have the financial records to be able to put together benchmarks. I have bolded our labor row, because labor, we spend so much money. We spend all our money on labor, basically. And that's fine. It's not one of our goals on our farm to minimize our labor expenditures. we really like paying people well. It is a stated farm goal. So having our labor benchmark ratio be high, that's okay. There's another number that we look at to try to keep things in line. But some of our other numbers that we look at are like our cost in resale. We do buy in some products from other farms and resell them. And that is a number that it usually has to do with some kind of crop failure on the farm. So it always keys me into what was going on in that year when we see our resale number all over the place. And then our insurance number is one where we had been in communication with some other farms who were also looking at their benchmarks and realized our insurance benchmark number was high. So it keyed us in to go and complain to the insurance agent who knocked $4,000 off from somewhere. Why was that available? Why wasn't it already mine? I don't know. But that was a really, just as an aside, it was really useful to have a peer group that was looking at this stuff together so that some of us could realize when other farmers were doing things better. So another nice part about the benchmarks, because it's a way to compare numbers without doing the full you show me yours, I'll show you mine. So in labor, that's where we're going to do a little bit of a close-up of our cost sync. Labor efficiency, I'm going to skip to this one first and then go back. So I talked about how we don't necessarily try to minimize our labor number. We want to pay people. It's awesome to pay people. But we do want to make sure that when we are paying people, it is because of efficient work, and we can pay people more when the work is more efficient. So there's another number we look at, that's called labor productivity. Labor productivity is your gross sales to the hours worked. So we track that per year. So it's fine if we're getting paid well as long as we're making well, if we're producing something that people are buying. And for a while, we just thought that's it. We just had to track that. And only in this past year did we really put this together. So in 2019, we know we had a killer crew. I don't think we had to hire anybody new that season. Everybody was a returning multiple year on the farm crew member. 2020, everybody knows what that was like. So 2020, we all made a ton of money. So much money. If you were direct retailing, people bought everything that you had. We also had a full returning crew that year too. So in those 2 years, we thought, well, it's because of our returning crew that our labor productivity number is so high. 2021, we had just such a shit show of a year with replacing staff, but then this last year seemed great. However, we didn't really have huge differences in our labor productivity between the year that I thought staff was wonky and the year that the staff seemed great. And it made us look back to 2020, where our labor productivity number was great, and it was because of the sales. Not because of anything anybody on our crew was doing. Basically, another way to look at it is, as the person driving the farm business, I needed to be having us spend more time on maximizing sales and on marketing. That's what was missing, and that's the labor productivity number there. So this is just a shout out for annual review. Really looking at your numbers and looking at them in different ways will lead you to the conclusions of what the next step is to work on within your business. And also, notice the inflation adjusted column. Be aware when you're comparing things from year to year of making sure you're adjusting for things like inflation if needed. So I'm going to go back up for a second and talk a little bit about our labor efficiencies. This is something I feel like we do really well on our farm. So the number one thing towards good labor efficiency is letting your staff have some skin in the game. And that is done through profit sharing. So on our farm, 6.5% of gross sales are distributed to staff. So just twice a year, a massive redistribution of that to staff. It's done on a formula. The formula takes into account how long somebody's worked on the farm, how many hours they worked in that sales period, and then is heavily based on a peer review. So everybody anonymously reviews all their coworkers. And that's what splits up the bonus pool equitably amongst staff. So profit sharing that has accountability worked into it. So you're sharing your profits, but you are making sure that it's in a way that everybody has some say in it, and you're giving more money to people who are putting more into the business, so who are generating more of the money. Those compensation structures should be crystal clear to staff, so absolutely like reviewable to anybody, so everybody understands what they would need to be doing in order to financially perform better within your business. We also have some more short-run compensation bonuses for the people who are marketing, who are like at the farmers markets marketing. So they get 5% of gross monthly sales, because that is a retail job. That's hard. So like we want to make sure that those folks are like immediately compensated for being asked if we have bananas in January. And then the other huge thing is systems for leadership within your farm. This is going to be different depending on how many people you have working for you, but there should be a manager for like almost anything that has to be done, big roles and small roles. So our flower production manager is also our trash manager. So big role, small role, but all of the roles are covered. Like every job has somebody that is in charge of that job. And if it's a big role, they should have a handbook. So it should be delineated what is expected of that person. Again, just made like really crystal clear. We have standard operating procedures for lots of stuff on our farm. Actually, upstairs in the vendor display room, I saw that there's an ATRA publication on SOPs for farms. Can't say enough about standard operating procedures. If there's something that you have to do more than once, it's probably worth just typing up what that job is, so that the next time it has to be done, you can hand over that printed out sheet and ask somebody to just check off every sentence when it's done. That's great for both you and your staff. Like you're giving somebody the means to do a good job that way. It also means that when shit is hitting the fan at your farm, people have an easily accessible way to figure out what to do next. So windstorms, power outages, medical emergencies, all of those are things that should have SOPs, but we also like having them on hand for trellising peppers, for construction and deconstruction of caterpillar tunnels. It's fantastic, and it takes 5 minutes per document, and if you do it in the off season, you don't have to have that be something that's taking up your time in the main season. We have lots of handbooks and orientations. All of our staff has to redo an orientation every spring, and we all do it together, so that we're all on the same page about not leaving your moldy shit in the staff fridge. You know, it's just like, this is like the housekeeping to make a social structure that we're all happy being within. So orientation every year, and then retention strategies. So frankly, a lot of the stuff I have just mentioned is already a retention strategy. So profit sharing, clear policies, like a workplace where people have things that they're in charge of and that they can improve. Those are all things that any of us would want in a place where we work. But we also just added 401ks to our farm. Which isn't like that hard to do actually. If you use ADP, there's a pretty cheap way, inexpensive to the farm to start a matching 401k for your employees. And as we talked about in the beginning, people aren't really great at saving for retirement. Most Americans don't do this until too late. And if you close your eyes, everybody close your eyes and think of the people that you work with. And now think of them when they're 95. And you want them to be taken care of, right? So if you have people on payroll, it's not too hard to start these programs so that you can take care of those people too. And it is going to make your workplace look more attractive as well. And then annual review. So this is a little bit different than what I was talking about with looking at your numbers again per year. Our annual review is a full day, all staff meeting where we tear the entire season apart. We talk about all of the improvements we made through the year, and then talk about all the things that were challenging and figure out how to fix it for the next year. And it is sometimes tense and messy. All in all though, it has been the biggest driver of change on our farm and on our systems. There's just a thing where farmers are all independent, I'm doing it on my own, it's on my project. any one head is not as good as all of our brains together, for sure. So getting everybody together to tackle your problems, that is what is possibly the biggest driver in the success of your business and towards profitability. But in particular, it also gets your labor, like your most precious and most expensive part of your business, all on the project of improvement together. And then the last thing I would say here is talking about management strategy, especially if you have other managers other than yourself on your farm. There's this super cheesy book called The 1 Minute Manager. Has anybody read it? Not too many people. It's painfully cheesy. It's so cheesy. But it's a really short read, it's a really quick read, and you can sum it up really easily. If you want people to like work well, work independently, and enjoy working somewhere, you have to let them know what the goal is. So like, what are we doing here? What's our goal? And that could be said of the whole farm goal. It's a good idea to have a cohesive mission statement, but in particular of a task, of a single task. So if we talked about trellising peppers, if we're trellising peppers, like what's the goal? The goal would be to have the peppers well supported and to have it done within 2 hours. So like some clear metrics. And then what does it look, and then you would want to describe what does it look like if the job is well done. All the posters straight up and down, none of them are going through the drip tape. We didn't cut our head open with the post pounder. Is Gabe in the room? Gabe's mom's in the room. Yeah, we didn't cut our head open with the post pounder while trellising the peppers. Like there's a clear, like this is what a good job looks like. This is what we're trying to avoid in the setup of a task. And then the other big thing is to let somebody get started, but come back within 5 minutes. Come back quickly, because then you will see what things you forgot to say. So which directions you forgot to give. And you will be able to make sure that's all firmed up before leaving somebody to screw up all day, which is not their fault, that's your fault. So like you quickly address a redirect. And this, when you have other people managing on the farm other than the one person, you want to make sure everybody's following the same style of leadership. Setting tasks up in the same way so that everybody on the farm can expect to be handled in the same way. The other thing about that is what to do when somebody decides not to follow the instructions that were given. That happens too. And even though that can be pretty frustrating, the management style delineated in 1 Minute Manager suggests that what you then do is just explain why that's bad. So explain, well, this is the effect that choice had on our goal, on our intended goal. So you try to like step back and leave feelings out of it and just explain it relative to what the goal was. Thank you. Some of the other things that are really important for labor efficiencies are accessible documents. So every week we create a to-do list that has the 10-day weather forecast, our staffing schedule for the week, the markets that we're going to, any notes that everybody should know, and then our desired to-do list for the week, and a farm map. So that we're an organic farm, every block has a different label to it, category name. So if we have the map there, when we have the instruction for which block we're working on, it's a way we can really make sure the correct planting of peppers is getting weeded, because it says so in 2 places and there's the map there. So this also just respects your team. So letting people know, like, these are the things we're really looking to accomplish this week. It shares the sense of urgency on some of the things that we're trying to do together. And it's an opportunity when first going over it all at the beginning of the week for other people to add in and say like, hey Jess, you forgot this other thing we didn't finish last week. So we talked about those SOPs, just looking at the other documents there. So the emergency things that should be accessible to everyone, maps, instruction documents, and then communication clipboards, sort of a weird one on there. That's not an official term for anything, but right near our time clock, we have a clipboard that has a pen tied to it. And if there's something that somebody noticed that they think everybody else needs to know, they write it down there. And there's this little picture of me next to the time clock with a speech bubble coming out of it that says, do you have anything to write for the communication clipboard? Also plug in your radio. And that's, the communication clipboard with a crew of 10 has really been helpful for knowing like when the gas tank is out of gas, and for knowing when we keep on having to put air in that front left tire of the blue truck. So stuff like that, just little stuff that makes us a better functioning team. Because we're an expensive team on our farm. We better function well. So, they say you should always tell people what you told them. Financial goal setting. Please do your math for how much money you need to make like an adult. If your farm business is not meeting your needs financially, then you have to do something different. You either have to change the business, you have to look into outside employment as well, but you have to do something. So you have to figure out how to make those numbers work. You can also cut your expenses. There's different ways to work the math, but you have to do something. Please figure out what numbers are real for you. Finding profit centers. Do the very painful work of writing down everything and finding out your overhead costs for everything, and which crops or which enterprises that you have are actually making you money. Benchmark ratios. That's the way you trend your business year to year. So figure out those expense category as they relate to sales year to year, so you can figure out which are really your sucks on your time and money, your money really, and figure out where to focus in on trying to become more efficient. I'm sure for a lot of grain farms, the labor cost isn't really it, it's something else. But then you just start diving down, writing all the numbers down and parsing it out. And then costing close up, if you are a vegetable or nursery or floriculture farm, the labor is probably your largest expense. Or it could be if you want to pay people really well. So really dialing into that is a high recommendation. And then with the annual review, I mean, this is we finished our 14th year of business, we're starting our 14th year, something like that. But like really, every year when we look at this stuff again, our farm team realizes something different about what our next horizon is for improvement and for fine tuning. So every year, expect to figure out that you were wrong about something and something else needs to be tried. Are there any questions?
I have a quick one.
I forgot to get back
How
to
do
you,
you
sorry.
pay yourself? Like, are you part of your labor expenses?
I am on payroll and I am the sole owner of the S Corp. So I get paid 2 times. Also want to throw out there's some really interesting stuff about cooperative businesses too. Like Rocksteady Farm in the Hudson Valley of New York has a lot of resources online for thinking about making more employee ownership possible in farms. It's something that's sort of the next thing on the horizon for us at Chickadee Creek.
In your picture, it looks like some of the rows are following a contour and some have a slope. What's the...
Our beds are on the contour to minimize erosion.
Did you have, just because I missed the beginning part of your talk, did you have a plan in place when you were getting on the property? Because you had mentioned that you have 50 crops that you grow. It would be easier to grow 10. Like, did you already have a mindset, like a plan in place before you took that direction, and how often has it changed?
Yeah, so the very first year we had less than 50 crops. The very first year, I think we had like 25, and I picked the 25 that in my research had the best net profit per acre and started there. And then the reason we've added things is because we wanted to make more money. Jenny.
The peer-reviewed analysis that you went through of the process that you got involved with, was that something formal that you paid for through something that the state was offering? Because I've heard about this, and to be encouraged, to me, I've been working with FSA for 12 years, 13 years, whatever it is, and it sounds like the program you're talking about is what they're encouraging their growers to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they were encouraging people. So in particular, we were involved in a peer financial benchmark study, or still are involved, through PASA. I believe they are accepting more people at any time. When we got involved, there was grant support for like 30 hours of business consulting that was a part of it. So we worked with Kitchen Table Consultants, which is a farm and food business consulting group. So that's when we got into it. It was a lot easier to have the consultant bring us in because they did 3 years of business records and put them into benchmarks for us. And also like set up our chart of accounts on QuickBooks and stuff. But see if PASA, they got another grant for the benchmark study. I'm not sure if it's structured the same way, and it was not limited to PA growers.
Could you please describe the structure of reaching your market, grocery stores, restaurants, those sort of things?
You said the structure of reaching our market?
Yeah, like who are you doing business with your farm?
Sure, so for our farm in particular, we go to farmers markets. We also offer on-farm pickups of pre-ordered things to both CSA members and non-CSA members through an online store. That was something we just started doing during the pandemic, and I don't think we'll ever get rid of it now.
How many CSA people?
We have 900 CSA members. They pick up through the farmers markets. So our CSA members generally run through our farmers markets. They can go to any of our farmers markets.
Do you
6?
So once every day?
No. Weekends are hot. Yeah. So we have multiple trucks. Charlize?
No, I noticed, and I just wanted to comment, that when you start off with your CSAs, you had just a few. And now, OFAs, we've been there for a few on. One of the reasons why your growth is so high, and for other people starting out, your CSA, because of your record keeping, allows you to put out multiple products and have people pick what they want. Whereas
Yes.
before that, the CSA model, when we first looked at CSAs, was you're going to get turnips this month. And if you don't want 50 bushels of turnips, you're going to have to figure out who to give them.
Yeah, so I think we have a market style CSA. I think that term probably means something to a lot of the folks in the room. And in 2010, when the farm first started, as far as I know, we were the first market CSA in New Jersey. Though it wasn't my idea. I got the idea from either Three Springs Farm or Three Oaks Farm in Oklahoma. They wrote an article in Growing for Market where they detailed. I know, right? So right in Trenton, there's Crest Paper Products. So a lot of like it's a local business too. So a lot of just the normal like plastic bags are Crest Paper Products, and then rubber bands. Alliance rubber bands. Yeah, number 62 is I think. Yeah. Okay, so it is 4 o'clock. How much time is there until the next session starts?
Half an hour.
So,
You could talk, but Richard may start setting up lights next to you.
okay. Is it okay if I keep the microphone? I feel powerful.
Yeah!
Okay, so I'm happy to keep on answering questions. Do you have closing remarks?
I just wanted to say, if there are questions, when you leave, could you keep the conversation outside so people can, so Jess can hear you. And I'd like a round of applause for Jess.
Yeah.
We are all in awe of Jess, and not only is she a great businesswoman, but she's so generous with sharing her knowledge
scooch
and
over
her
a little more.
mistakes, which is a great thing.
Just your head,
For
scooch
new
over.
farmers to be able to learn and have their own shortcuts. I want you all to know something. In addition to everything she said and the annoying, shitty paperwork, and the 9 farmers markets and the 900 CSAs, every single week they have donated. Somebody is in charge on that farm. They're paying labor to donate hundreds and hundreds of pounds of the most beautiful organic produce to us to give to food pantries. How? So there is a line item in that budget and in those outputs and costs that you have factored. It's really worth it. I'm incredibly grateful, and just be Jess. Be Jess.
Any other farm profitability questions or comments?
I was just wondering, you have such marvelous team management, labor management, philosophy and practice on your farm. Nevertheless, something can always go wrong. Have you ever had any trouble with an employee, right? Have you ever prompted some legal, issue or anything else like that? How did you mitigate those risks in management?
So the question was whether we've had any trouble with employees or legal trouble with employees. So we have not had legal trouble with employees. That sounds terrible. But I would say that having handbooks is a big deal, and requiring acknowledgement of the receipt and reading and understanding of the handbooks can circumvent a lot of the problems. So our handbook clearly says if you're late to work more than 10 minutes 3 times in a season, that is grounds for the dismissal. So it clearly says, like, these are our workplace rules, and you've read it, you're working here anyway, you have to do this. Our workplace rules clearly say, like, you may not discriminate, you can't be an asshole, in more clear terms. But those are ways to prevent problems from happening. And if there did seem to be a legal problem, I honestly think the first thing I might do is contact my payroll company, because they're constantly sending me emails about HR services. So like, honestly, my next step might be talking to my insurance company or my payroll company to find third-party help for such problems.
You do not have HR.
I am HR. We don't offer health insurance. At this time with our crew, we have a number of people who have, they're in a partnership that have their other partner providing health insurance. We also find that a lot of people are able to find pretty good deals on health insurance. Yeah. Tony?
Jess, do you have any suggestions for new farmers who are just starting with the concept of employees? So that transition from employer working for you or working for yourself to being the boss can be really tricky, and if I find myself trying to be that person's friend, it just doesn't really work. So do you have any advice for someone making that transition?
Yeah, so I am not the best boss in the world. Like, I am prone to being impatient and thinking I've communicated something clearly when I haven't, and like really showing it if I'm irritated about something. So, and that was all a lot worse when starting out. And I would really recommend reading books on managing people. Like, just do that. Just assume that you don't know how to do that yet, and take the steps to learn how to do that. So just, you don't know how to manage people. Why would you? It hasn't been something you've had to do. So give yourself the grace of teaching yourself and learning how to do it. The other part about that employee review is that I'm part of, like, I get reviewed too. And it's still anonymous, so I don't know who's saying it, but I can see all of the different metrics that I've been reviewed on. One whole, like, big chunk is, like, team and, like, attitude. So, like, I get the feedback, and, like, I know when I'm being a jerk in a half-year period. So I would say that, one, try to have some way to accept feedback yourself, probably more direct than just an anonymous review. Oh, one thing we also do is we have 2 time-a-year check-ins with so me one-on-one with staff. We have a check-in in May and then a check-in, I think it's like September. And at that point, you're asking if there's any problems. And when people are asked one-to-one, they do tend to tell you if they have problems with you. It's great.
Jess? Yeah. So, one of the things that I struggle with is knowing when is a good time to put more money into a capital investment, so machinery, buildings and structures. Do you have, like, how do you figure out when, okay, I really want this machine, when's the right time to get it?
Yeah, so the machine is an easier one for me than like the building and structure. Partially because I have put a moratorium on building and structures until somebody will sell me this stinking farm. I don't own the farm. But the machine is actually pretty easy because of those worksheets. So we did this specifically for a potato digger at one point and for a tractor at another point to see if the cost was justified. So with the potato digger, we were able to see how many years, just by making the predictions on how quickly we could harvest with that versus the undercutter that we were using, or the potato plow we were using, and felt happy with the 3-year return. So that one is just like, okay, that satisfies our goals. Also, we'll be so much happier with this potato digger. And with the tractor, it was pretty much the same thing, looking at what we were doing now and the cost of what we were doing before purchasing a new one. And especially, we started to run into the situations where our week-to-week sales were really getting high. Like we were really grossing a lot week to week. So thinking about like holding back on the purchase of a $32,000 tractor, when having a tractor that was really going to be functioning well for us would allow us to plant like $50,000 worth of produce in the time it would take to fix the other tractor, those numbers started to get pretty clear. So it's literally just, it's mathing it out. It's what are we doing now? How much more can we make if we do this instead? And some of it is risk management too. Like we never got to the point where we were missing planting dates because of the old tractors breaking down, but we could see how easily it could happen and like how much trouble we would be in if it did. So not quite waiting to the point where we were losing money before making that risk management decision to buy something more expensive but much more reliable. Did that answer it?
Yeah.
With buildings, I think it's probably a lot harder, and I can't say that I'm there yet with
It's
really
mostly
knowing.
machines for me, but yeah.
Yeah. So we have had this, like, I know paper pot transplanters aren't like crazy expensive, but I keep on like wrestling with them because I can't make our numbers work well for them. It sounds like the silliest thing for me to like fixate on, but I can't, like so far.
That's one of ours, and part of it is like wondering, are our beds and our other systems set up that we can transition to that
Yeah.
without it creating extra weird work in the middle of our.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Shirley's?
Early on I remember when you won the National Young Farmer of the Year.
Hillary did too, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Hillary!
One of the things you said that was so important when you were talking to people at NOFA-NJ to avoid debt when you're starting out. Is that still something you are able to do?
Yeah, we still have 0 debt load, but we're trying to buy a farm. So we're about to say goodbye to that. But I don't know, I think I've actually matured a little bit on that topic. I would say like, if you don't know what you're doing, avoid debt. But if you have really good control and forecasting of your numbers, then you can pencil in debt and it's not unhealthy. But until you like can, as a grown-up financially healthy adult, pencil in debt and understand that you can, that is an okay liability for you, then yeah, totally avoid debt. If you don't know if you can take on the debt, do not take on debt. Do not owe any. So the farm, I never borrowed any money to start anything with the business. And part of it is because Charlie's let me live in a cabin in the goat pasture for years. Thank you.